I'm Brian Professor B. Davis. This is a special presentation of 49ers Talk on Niners Radio 49 podcast. On my guest will be, he's been a lifer, did writing, covered for 49ers for nearly more than close to 35 years. He started at the Santa Rosa Press Democrat, going way back in 1989. He also worked at Sports Illustrated along with Peter King, and he just recently came out with this brand new book. His name is Mike Silver. I had this interview with him recently at this lecture event at the Jewish Community Center in San Francisco, along with NFL Hall of Famer, former Super Bowl champion, two-time league MVP, and five-time passing rating leader champion Steve Young. We talk about his new book regarding with Kyle Shanahan's tree, and about the times with Steve Young in the 1994 Super Bowl season, the last time the Niners won it all. Hope you enjoy this podcast and talking with Mike Silver, which begins right now.
Like 4 downs, right? And we had theological discussions, I believe. We're on my home turf tonight, but
my roommates at the time were there's 2 Jewish guys in the whole NFL. They're both my roommates. The great John Frank, a tight end, played for years, who that year broke his finger. That Mike's response, he broke his finger, and he wanted to be a surgeon. And when he broke his finger, he's like, I gotta go, and he left the game to go to med school. And now he became a doctor. And Harris Barton protected my blind side for forever.
Yeah.
And we're dear friends. We lived together, and we were very close for many. And he's still my neighbor down on the peninsula. So it's we stayed together all those years.
That's the most Jewish thing ever, that he left in his prime to go to medical And I don't know if you know, but Steve's alma mater, BYU, it's come full circle because
it is our quarterback, Jake Retzlaff. You guys know this story? He's the only Jewish quarterback in the NCAA. And he is killing it. BYU is 7-0. They're ranked in the top 10. And he is the star.
What do they call him?
And he, a year ago, he's a good guy. I know him well. We actually became friends in the last 2 years since he came on campus. And he's trademarked hashtag BYJew. You gotta look it up. He's killing it. He's killing it. And they're selling t-shirts and hats. And if they keep winning, it could be the biggest thing ever. So this week they're playing UCF, but they're undefeated, and it's really a great story.
So this weird thing was happening because I had seen him play, obviously, and would see him in practice, and I don't know if you guys saw him play much, but he's unbelievable. And I knew that, and we'd go to all these other cities, and I'd be out, researching the game in bars and stuff. And
background.
And fans would be like, "Oh my God, Steve Young, he's incredible." But then around here, he was not Joe, and he hadn't been the guy yet, and so you'd get a lot of skepticism. In fact, I think we reference in the book. What was your favorite San Francisco Chronicle headline, Steve, during that?
It was in 1991. The Gulf War had broken out in the Middle East. And there was a headline above the fold in the Chronicle, the Gulf War, it's Steve Young's fault. Front page. If you lived it out with me, if you know, you know. Right? It was rough.
So I ended up at the Santa Rosa Press Democrat, and after the 1991 season, Steve had spent the year as the starter. Joe Montana was out with an elbow injury, and they'd struggled, and then they came on really late and were great, but just missed the playoffs. And going into 92, Mike Holmgren, the great offensive coordinator, had left to become the coach of the Green Bay Packers. Bill Walsh had obviously preceded him as the guru of offense and one of the greats in football history. And they hired a curious choice as Holmgren's successor, which is Mike Shanahan. Mike Shanahan had been the hotshot coach of the LA Raiders and fired by Al Davis, like it went really bad. Then he went back to Denver where he'd been an assistant, was fired by Dan Reeves and accused of insubordination, which I think was code for, I'm worried that Mike Shanahan and John Elway are conspiring to run the offense without me, which in retrospect they should have. They probably did. So Mike was kind of embattled, and Steve was not yet accepted. And together, I saw them do, mind-boggling things for 3 years, culminating in a game you might remember, Super Bowl 29, where at long last it was irrefutable that he was an all-time great. And so Steve really talked to me a lot back then about how Mike was different and what distinguished him. And that's kind of the jumping off point of this book and what ultimately impacted these 5 coaches and has now changed the game. So I just want to start by asking you, to talk about what it was like when you and Mike.
Well, I love this book because you hit on a thread that needs to get promoted. Because if you love football, and you love today's football, and you love the NFL, this is the rooted story of why 90% of the offensive minds in the NFL come from this root. And it comes from Bill Walsh, who, at the time, in 1989, when you joined, Bill had just, 88 was the year that, the big year that, and it was during 87, 88 when I was there that he was gathering all the things he knew in his West Coast offense, all the installation books, all the tapes of the speeches, video-based, practice sessions, anything that kind of brought forward all the things. He was 3 generations ahead of everybody, and he wanted to put it in one place. But he didn't want to put it in a museum, which would be appropriate because he was one of the great coaches of all time at the time. He was gathering it so he could hand it to his assistant coaches, because especially his minority coaches weren't getting those head jobs, and he wanted them to have a leg up. And so he knew they'd come back and compete against him, but he didn't care. He wanted, in a spirit of abundance, I'll call it, at the height of his career, he handed out all his secrets to the people that were close to him. And so in doing so, he gave it to Mike Holmgren, who went to the Green Bay Packers. And who was Mike Holmgren's first hire? Andy Reid, who he met at BYU, who's over back at BYU, it's a full circle moment too. He at BYU and a graduate assistant because Mike Holmgren was at BYU. And then Mike Holmgren went to San Francisco, went to the Green Bay Packers and hired Andy Reid. And all of these young, innovative minds are all from the spirit of abundance, because that's the way they're good now. And you look at the people who have learned from them, whether it's Mike McDaniel in Miami or anywhere else anyone goes, they hand them, it's tradition now. I'm giving you everything I know, go be great. And it all came from one man, and I give him, I honor him. This book it's not specific, but it is all about that one act at the height of his career, not to put it in a museum, but to pay it forward. And I think I've used this as an inspiration for my life to watch what Bill did.
I love that because there's so many coaches who are hoarders. They don't want to lose their bright staff members. In fact, I'll just tell one story from later in the book. Mike McDaniel is Kyle Shanahan's right-hand man and a main character in this book, and really the run game guru, the guy that Kyle trusts to handle the running plays, among other duties. And he's a guy who's got an incredible story, unusual story. Went to Yale. There's a quote in here that says he's
I'm good. I'm with you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I know you know.
Like, you look at me like you don't know what I'm talking about.
I know you know. No, I was looking at you, but there was like one person who didn't see Good Will Hunting. And so he'd had some troubles with alcohol that he overcame, and he finally gets his first head coaching interview. And it's the Miami Dolphins, and this is during the 2022 playoffs. And by NFL rule, and after COVID, it's got to be by Zoom, the first interview. And so the Dolphins are interviewing many people, and they're trying to schedule this Zoom interview. And mysteriously and unusually, because it's playoff time, Kyle twice changes the practice schedule abruptly, which short circuits the interview times, which Mike McDaniel believes is an attempt to, screw him over or throw him off his game. And ultimately the Dolphins decide, wow, Kyle really doesn't want to lose this guy, and it might have backfired. But a lot of coaches don't like losing their people, and Bill was so unusual. And, I've been talking about the minority coaching stuff and the inequities since I started in 1989, and it's still a problem, but Bill has done more to, try to deal with that issue than.
Yeah, it wasn't just a philosophy, like he wanted to do something about it.
Yeah.
People can be intentional and say, look, I really want our world to be better. And there's people that just go do it. Like I'm gonna bottle and hopefully it'll catch fire. And in a way, I parent the same way. It's like I can't tell them what to do, but I can model. And so I hold that kind of a sacred ground where I'm going to try. And I think Bill was somebody that he was very intentional and then did something about it. And I think it made a difference.
So Mike Shanahan comes in and now has the Bill Walsh offense in front of him, but he didn't do it the way that Mike Holmgren did. And I guess just tell people what it was like, how Mike's approach was, and then what Mike Shanahan did.
So unusual, under pressure, human behavior is that pressure rises, then your heartbeat goes up, cortisol goes up, anxiety, and then your mind literally shrinks a little bit to try to stay focused. And Mike was somebody that leaned into that behavior to say, I don't care. I'm not going to worry that somehow that we're not going to shrink to the physiology. We're going to go for it. We're laying it out. We're going for it. So, and in a way, it calmed the mind. He was so aggressive in his mindset and how he talked about he'd get up in front of the team on Wednesday at installation. We're playing like this week the Cowboys, and he would say this defensive scheme, this is terrible. We're going to kill them. We're going to kill them with these plays. He listed the plays. He said, by halftime this game will be over. And we're like, it's Wednesday, really? It's been over? And then that's how he coached, that's how he thought, and that's how he played. And in that way, it brought, and one of the things that he said to me early on in our relationship, he said, Steve, I trust you. This is how this is going to go down. Most coaches are very careful in what they call, so they don't want to put their quarterback in a bad spot. Flipping the script. I'm not going to worry about anything. I'm going to be as aggressive and crazy as I possibly can be. You protect me. And by doing that, I remember feeling so empowered and responsible. And I studied differently. I prepared differently because I wanted to make sure that he was protected in doing something amazing. And Mike, you know about those 3 years that we were together. I mean, we're unstoppable. And it was really, I think, not just a play that was called, it was the fundamental philosophy and the spirit of leaning in and empowering the people on the field. And a lot of coaches they inadvertently, by mistake, by not understanding, disempower the person on the field. by making them feel like, oh, I don't trust you. I'm not sure that I want to, be careful. All the verbiage that tells you that you're worried, and then they make a mistake. You're like, oh my gosh, don't make another one. And then another one comes because like, oh, well, now we're really in trouble. And then the guy's got to go back on the field and go, oh, can't wait to, see this next screw up. It's human behavior. But so many people shrink at the idea of failure and pressure and anxiety. And he was somebody just uniquely gifted.
And I remember you telling me then, and I know there are parallels now with Kyle, but Mike Holmgren was kind of like, hey, we have our plays, they're great, we have our system, we're going to run them, there's always an answer, and we'll roll. Mike Shanahan was very opponent-specific in his game planning. He would try to figure out their rules and use it against them and then counter their counter moves. But what I remember Steve telling me back then, which always kind of stuck in my mind when I started thinking about conceiving this book, was Mike made it really personal about the coach or the coordinator he was going against.
It was absolutely personal. It wasn't personal in a I want to fight you way. It was personal to, look, we are combatants, we are opponents. We are going to go at it with each other in total respect, never disrespectful, but we're going to go at it. And so I'm going to stare at you, and that's what we do on film. Like you stare at somebody, and then I'm like, I see the weaknesses, and that's where we're going. And so we had to be athletic about our preparation because he was going somewhere each week, and we had to follow along. And it wasn't necessarily cookie cutter. It was like, okay, everyone, this is what we're doing. It's new. Get it in your mind on Wednesday, and by Thursday you better have it down. And to me, I always felt empowered by that. I felt inspired. I turned the TV off Wednesday nights, and I would go back in the book and make sure that I was ready for Thursday. And that's unusual. Most guys, school is not a favorite thing. Football players are not like, oh, I can't wait to go to school, right? But when somebody challenges you in a way intellectually, and you want to respond. And I really appreciated him doing that. It was specific. It was personal. He would say the guy's name, the defensive coordinator, like, this guy, we're going to kick his ass. We're going to run out of the building.
And like exposing the truth, right? Like
right.
exposing the...
Saying, look, I'm not just hyperbole. Like, these are the plays. This is how. And then it was. And that led to... I don't know. You have to, the statistics for football back then, offensive statistics, because the game's changed now because of the safety rules, has changed and made it more wide open, and everyone who ever played back then just sees the game today and is like, please let me play. No one covers the flats, the middle of the field is wide open and no one can hit me. Let me in.
Also, they could take 2 steps after you threw the ball and hit you anywhere. That's changed a little bit.
It's changed a lot. But if you take those statistics of 92, 93, 94, the threes were together, you can still come up even in some ways to today's. That's how incredible it was, and it was a beautiful thing. And he was. I always call him Mike. Let's go over it again, Shanahan.
Well, there's a story in the book about that that pertains to Super Bowl 29, and so tell them what he told you leading into that game and take us through.
So the Super Bowl is a different kind of game because obviously what's at stake, but then the delays. You get to the stadium much more early. The pregame is elongated. You've got all kinds of it's unusual. And so for a guy that's Mike, let's go over against Shanahan, the Super Bowl is like not my favorite day with him. And so about the 40th time of going through it again in the locker room, I'm like, Coach, I can't go over it again. Like I'm done. He goes, you know what? It's fine. We're good. You're going to throw 8 touchdowns. If you don't understand football,
yeah.
that's a stupid thing. It's stupid.
The record at the time for most touchdowns in a Super Bowl thrown was Joe Montana with 5.
Which is insane.
Yeah.
Like 5 is crazy. Like
Crazy.
five, no, you're gonna throw 8. And I chuckle. I'm like, that's stupid. So then we play the first half. We come in at halftime. He looks me dead in the eye and goes like this. Because we'd thrown 4 in the first half. Basically saying, in the typical of him, he's like, I told you. So then we went out in the second half, threw 2 more, and then we were up by so many points, it was over. And so George Seifert decides, okay, we're pulling the starters out of the game, Super Bowl's over, we're champions, we won. And so out I came. I go over to the phone, because Mike Shannon's up in the booth, in the coach's booth, and you can talk to him on the phone. You've seen that. I mean, you get on the phone and talk to him. And I still go to the phone. I'm like, Coach, congratulations, man! It's amazing, because it's amazing. It's an amazing moment. Like, think about the relief. You're like, that 5 hours ago, my life was going to be different dramatically, one way or another, and now it's amazing. And so I'm like, Coach, this is amazing. He's pissed. He goes, did George take you out of the game? I'm like, yeah, we're good. He goes, we're not good, there's 2 more. There's 2 more. In his mind, he's thinking, there's 8 out there, and I want them. You cannot take them away from me. And I laugh about that because it's an insane thing to throw 6. I was like, but I always say, Mike, that if you ever have a goal in mind, like throwing 6 quarter touchdowns in the Super Bowl, how do you do it? You go for 8. Like, that's kind of how we thought about it. And it's a heck of a thing. It's a heck of a thing. And I've used that metaphor a lot in my life because that's an inspiration in some ways. It's crazy. It's nutty, but there's something to it.
There's another version of that reminds me of, so one time when I was at Sports Illustrated, I was doing a story on hitting, and John Lynch, I think, was in town early in his TV career, and I said, now the 49er general manager, and I said, John was a really hard-hitting future Hall of Fame safety, and I said, John, what's your philosophy on hitting? And he said, well, I always think back to something Ronnie Lott used to tell me, and he said, there's a guy right there in front of you going up to catch the ball, he said, and there's an invisible guy behind him and an invisible guy behind him. Kill the third guy.
It sounds scary.
The rules have changed.
But you get used to it. It's like an IndyCar drivers at 350 miles an hour. Like, you do get used to it. And we did get used to it. But do you remember when Ronnie Lott, reminds me of that story, when Phil Simms said we were laid down like dogs, and the next time we played, remember Ronnie went after him at halftime?
Yeah, Monday night.
Yeah. The pregame. I got to tell you the story because Ronnie goes after Phil Simms for disrespecting him and the 49ers. And he wasn't going to stand for it. And they went at each other. And the funny thing is, because it was Ronnie Lott, usually if this happens on the football field, there's this goofball shoving scuffle thing where you kind of just like push around, nobody moved. They just let Ronnie go after Phil. Like, no one touched it. Even the Giants were like, it's Ronnie Lott. Just don't touch it.
Ronnie played on the USC basketball team, I remember. And one time, back then there were these bench clearing brawls when there'd be a fight. And one time, like, that started to happen, and everybody went back to the bench because Ronnie Lott was on the
Well, so he's going with Phil like this. So afterwards, I asked him, what were you saying? He goes, doesn't understand. And typical Ronnie, it's kind of cryptic. Like, what do you mean he doesn't understand? He goes, well, you can't disrespect competition. Because if you disrespect it, then what am I doing here? If we're just winning and losing, if that's all this is, I don't want to be part of it. If there's something more, I'm in all the way. And if you disrespect that, this is sacred ground because losers learn. And if we're not about learning, we're not going to respect each other, then I don't want to do it. And I always thought about that. It's interesting because the most competitive, insane, crazy, transactional moment of playing in a football game with a score, Ronnie Lott's saying, I don't want to do it unless you respect it. We respect each other for the competition. Otherwise, I don't want to do it. I thought that was a heck of a statement.
That's pretty cool.
Great riding line.
So,
I don't like. Sorry,
so the night he throws the 6 touchdown passes, and it's still a Super Bowl record, and
Well, yeah, what idiot's going to say I'm going to go for 8?
and
You only won Mike Shanahan. Now, Kyle, maybe.
yeah, Kyle might try.
He might.
Yeah.
He might say
Brock
that.
Purdy might try someday,
Yeah,
but
right.
maybe not this February. We'll see. But
It's going to be harder.
it's early. It's
It's
early.
going to be harder. We know this. It's uphill, and we're just going to climb it. That's what we're going to do. So, hang in there.
So that night there's a victory party at the hotel in Miami. I am there for Sports Illustrated. I just got hired, but I wasn't writing the main story. But one of my sidebars was about Mike because the Broncos were talking to him. And one of my sidebars was about the Deion Sanders, Jerry Rice confrontation, or 2 confrontations that they still try to deny happened.
If you bring it up, you're going to. DM will fight you.
Yeah.
So just.
And they don't like it.
We'll give you there's certain things, Mike, that you want. You just got to let it go.
Yeah.
Just let this one go.
But at this party, I remember Mike coming down very late with a big grin, and he'd been up with the owner of the Broncos, Pat Bowlen, finalizing a deal. And you said you did not see that coming.
I'm married to the same woman for 25 years this March. It's a beautiful thing. But Mike Shanahan was my first marriage. All right? Like, what we were doing together and how he empowered me and how it made me feel, I didn't want that to end. And that was a very painful conversation he had about an hour after you talked about that. I'm like, wait, I thought we were throwing 8 touchdowns. Where are you going? You going to Denver? No. And so that was tough. It's tough because when you make great music together, you don't want it to end, and you never want that to end. And that was hard.
There's my wife of 33 years, Leslie, right there.
Way to go, Leslie! Wow, what a warrior! What a warrior! Holy cow!
Leslie and Barb.
Does he talk this much at home?
He does.
Does he sidle up to you and kind of whisper and kind of like, hey, what really happened out there today? What do you think about? I saw that you changed shoes. Did you?
Steve,
you looked funny. Your eyes were. You looked like you were upset. Were you upset in the third quarter? No, what are you looking at? You're like, stop with all this detail.
well, you'll be happy to know she's a psychologist. So.
Oh my God! Thank you. But because one thing I say about Mike, you better, if you write something, ignore it at your peril. I mean that because he has sidled up and he's got an angle of something that he heard, not because he came up with it, because he heard it, and now I want to figure out what the truth is, and I'm going to find it, and I'm going to figure out 14 people to kind of like, so what is that? And then when he writes it, there's truth in it. And you better, and some people say, oh, because some sports writers, so many athletes are like, that's crap, that's garbage, that's ridiculous, because it is hyperbole. A lot of people don't do the work. But I'm grateful to be here with Mike and help you tonight, because it's hard, he's been hard on me. I've read things that hurt, physically hurt. But I have to be honest with you. As I read it, I'm like, damn, I think there's something to this. And now I gotta go own it. And I think in some ways, if you're open to learning and growing in life, that's the point, which I think it is, you kind of are grateful to rub up against guys that maybe make you bleed a little bit, just to have you sharpen up. And so I want to tell you publicly, Mike, I've always very much appreciated how you do it. I'm sorry for 33 years, but I just think that I really do appreciate people like you that are willing to make it an honest engagement. You know what I mean? An honest engagement. There's no hyperbole, no cheap thrills, because it's hard to write without having cheap thrills are cheap, right? They're easy, and I appreciate it.
I appreciate you. And, I've made this joke to Joe before, and it applies to you as well. And at one point, we tried to do a chart of all the people who had risen in their career based on those, incredible 49er teams from the Walsh era and Seifert era, and it was like equipment managers were getting big jobs. I mean, it was really like every area of football, including coaches, obviously. And then we started doing media, and I realized, it was before the internet, and I ended up getting a job at Sports Illustrated in 1994, and like, if I was covering the Buccaneers when Steve was there, or after, or a different team, there's no way that my articles would have been that big and that well read. So I basically rode your guys' coattails just like everyone else, and I'm proud.
All the way to the Gulf War. Good job. Good job.
But it is true that like you're only as good as the people who will talk to you and help you, and Steve always did. Mike Shanahan has been great to me. Went on to become the head coach of the Broncos, won 2 Super Bowls, ends up in Washington in the early 2010s with these 5 guys, among others, on his staff. Incredible staff: Raheem Morris, Mike McDaniel, Matt LaFleur, his son Kyle, and Sean McVay, all current NFL head coaches, and some others. And you've talked a lot about, because I liken it to kind of their environment with all those young, innovative guys, that it would be like early Silicon Valley.
100%, you're where you're going. I agree with
Like, imagine if all those guys were one firm, Steve Jobs and Ted Hoff and Andy Grove, you know better than I do.
But football, what's different is technology was new, and so it bred innovative ideas. Like it happened to you. Like it's brand new. What can we do with this? Where can it go? But football's old. Well, we've been around a long time. But what's amazing is people who could step back, look at it, and go, hey, wait a second. Just like Bill Walsh did in the West Coast offense. Wait a second. What if we just tore up the whole thing and throw everything out in the parking lot and only cool stuff comes back in? What if we did that? And I think that Mike bred that. He had to have bred that kind of spirit, because those 5 names are all the innovative names today that are looking at the new rules that have changed the game, and it makes it more wide open and more college-like and wild, and said to themselves, okay, how would we adjust? And I see so many offenses today playing this weekend, still running the plays from 2014. Like, those days are older. That's like, I might as well be back in the stagecoach. Might as well, but they just can't see what's happened. And so why are these 5 guys thriving? Because they've seen what's happened. They lead into the innovation every day, and they compete with each other. If you want to watch fun stuff, watch Sean McVay and the Rams play with Kyle Shanahan, and they're literally looking at each other like, okay, wait, that was cool, but let me see if I got something cooler. And they just go back and forth. And I love those games because they're doing so many cool things that I can appreciate, because I know the nuances of it and the jealousy of not being out there right now doing it. And so I think that's why the book brings forward what's brought the game forward. The game, like anything, it can get stuck. And I can say we were stuck, but for Bill Walsh, they would hire a coach, the same guy over and over again, and doing the same thing with a big stick, just whipping the players, and and it's like, oh. And Bill Walsh comes on, and these guys are all grandsons of his in a way, right? In the tree, when Bill would talk about, look, we don't care what play we call, we don't care what defense we run. What will matter at the end of the day, whether we're going to be great or not, is how much love we show from amongst each other. I remember the first time he said it, I was like, it's football, bro. Like, what are you talking about? But he knew relationships shared common experiences forced together. So you didn't know just their name on the back, you know. And so I think that the spirit, when I go back to the 49ers today, I go back down to the facility and I see that team and I see the spirit of it. It all is about being innovative, thoughtful, tearing things up every week, trying something new, and then empowering people in the locker room to go be great. And you wonder, why are the 49ers good? Why are the Packers good? You know, why? Well, because read the book.
Well, you know, like to bring it to today, the 49ers are 3-4, and it's not looking great right now. And then you look back at, say, 2021, they lose to the Cardinals to go 3-5, and we talk about it in the book. But Kyle basically tells the team, you know, we're gonna play the Rams now on Monday night, and we're gonna run it 40 times, and we're gonna change, you know, the way we approach this. And he does a couple of things, but one of the things he does is he realizes that to get the running game going, he's going to take his best receiver, Deebo Samuel, and turn him into a part receiver, part running back.
Who does that?
Yeah, in the middle of the season. And it changes the whole season, and they get all the way to the NFC Championship game where they play the Rams and Sean McVay. Kyle owns, except for this one game. And I don't know if you want to hear this, it might be too soon, but if Jaquiski Tartt catches that interception, they probably go to the Super Bowl.
Unfortunately, there's between here and there are 5 other things that happen that are so painful that you know.
And so in the book in 2012, so Steve is, you know, one of the greatest running quarterbacks also, you know, ever. At the time, running quarterbacks were more of an anomaly, and, you know, Michael Vick kind of, you know, was another level of speed. And then Robert Griffin III gets drafted by that staff in Washington, really by the owner. He'd been an incredible college player at Baylor, but he'd only run plays out of this formation, the pistol, which is kind of a shotgun that's a little shallower. And now Kyle is the offensive coordinator, and all these other guys are faced with having to design an offense for a guy who's never gone and taken a snap really and under center. And conventional wisdom was, we're going to teach him our system and make him learn. And they ended up transporting the entire Shanahan offense, which was kind of the West Coast offense merged with this outside zone attack, which we get into in the book. And they run the whole thing out of the pistol. And the whole league was so blown away and unable to stop it that he ended up having one of the great rookie seasons ever. And they won their division and, you know, went into the playoffs until he got hurt. But it was just it sounds simple. We get into the book how it isn't, but I think that's a great example of the way they think.
Well, if Mike Shanahan announced they're going to have a senior football league and Mike Shanahan's going to be the coach, I'm going. I'm going.
You know, you told me that I think it was in 2019, they had you sit in on a Saturday night meeting before a game, and you kind of saw Kyle in action. And Kyle's not known as much as Sean McVay as being this, you know, Sean kind of sounds like a TED Talk sometimes, and Kyle is more
different
real.
personalities. Different personalities.
Yeah, but
Sean's more retail.
And
Kyle's more, you know, wholesale.
and you heard Mike make all these incredible, you know, personal speeches about, we're going to expose this guy. We're going to show, you know, we're going to show that he doesn't do it right. What did you see from Kyle?
Kyle's very Kyle's not as emphatic, as much, you know, demonstrative. Like up front, like he's more straight facts and very more monotone, but more like, look, this is what we're going to do. So it's very similar to his dad. When I was there, I was like, oh my gosh, it's his dad, but just, you know, calmer. And what he'd done, I remember watching the first, you know, historically Bill Walsh started the night before the game, the offense comes together and they go through the first 15, which is the first 15 plays, to give everyone a sense of what we're going to do, schematically tomorrow, and what's our strategy. And that was, Bill always thought that would be a leg up, and it really was, as everyone does it now in the whole league. But so Kyle's doing that for the team. Let's go through the first 15. And he goes through it, and I'm watching the plays and how he's installing them, and every pass, I'm like, well, what about blitz? What about, because used to be, you'd have a play, but if it only worked against certain things, then, you get blown up about 4 other things. And so you'd have all these, and he goes, no, it's all handled. They figured out a way to have the offensive line take that on them, have them rise up intellectually and do more, and so they could take it off the quarterback's shoulders, and then make it so that the quarterback didn't have to worry about it and could focus even more so on deploying the football, right? Like, where does it go? How do I get it out? Who am I looking at? And just made it. And I was like, so after he was done, I walked up to Kyle and I said, Kyle, you didn't say anything about blitz. He goes, it's fine. Don't worry about it. I'm like, don't worry about it? Like, freaking sign me up. Like, why is this game changing so much? Like, don't worry about it. That's all I worried about. And it just tells you, off of the back of great innovative thought, now generations forward, everyone kind of taking what they had, standing on the shoulders of the person before them, honoring it, and then saying, I'm going further. I thought this many times. Bill Walsh passed away in 2007.
Yeah.
And if he was alive today, I know what he would say. He's like, why didn't I think of that? You know what I mean? Because it's iterations further of the things that he was doing with innovative, thoughtful people, taking the game in a place that, football was dying in some ways because it was dying without innovation. It was dying and just falling in on itself. And they just kept doing the same thing over and over and over again. And now the league is so much fun because of people that are willing to kind of go out and think about it differently. Now, to this season, Kyle this week has got to be in there with the smoke coming out of the chimney, kind of like, okay, so stuff's not happening. And it feels more staid, and it doesn't feel like we're as explosive, and we're not, like, what's in it? He has to kind of innovate on himself now, because last year, the season that we watched the 49ers, I always say retail football is the play called in the huddle, then you go run the play, that's retail. Then anything else that happens after that play breaks down is wholesale, right? It's like, run around crazy. You see the game today, so much of it is the wholesale part of the game. It's like, you saw Patrick Mahomes on Sunday, run around, fake out, and so last year, the 49ers, it was like any play that was called worked, like flawlessly. And it was an amazing run of what I call retail football. Just call it, it's gonna kill them. Yeah. And it was amazing. This year, it felt like the whole league took 6 months from February to July. Is that 6? That's no monkey mouth football math. So, and said, we have some time off, which we do. We'll study the 49ers. And I think the league did that. And I think Kyle's now has to kind of innovate again, right? And figure out ways
on the fly.
On the fly.
There are very few stories where Bill Walsh is not heroic, that I tell at least. And there's one exception. And so he created the first 15. The scripting of plays, which everyone does. I can't remember if you were hurt for this game or healthy. They went to Green Bay, and Bill had come back as like an offensive consultant or something. Yeah. And they land, and they go to the team hotel, and a fan comes over to Bill and says, Bill, will you sign my, thing? And Bill grabs a piece of paper and somehow hands him back the paper and also the first 15. and this being Green Bay, the
same place, same verbiage, same everything, because he handed it to him.
Yeah.
So the Packers, Brett Favre and I could have changed teams on game day and not played for the other team, because that's how.
And so this being Green Bay, the fan drove it over to Lambeau Field and presented it to Coach
Mike
Holmgren.
Hogan claims in the honor of running off competition, I never looked.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there was a trick play in there.
Honor of the great Roddy Lott. I'm not going to look at the piece of paper.
I just remember there was a trick play in the first 15 because I went back and watched that they just seemed to know it was coming. Did you play or was that Elvis?
That was my rib. That was the rib game.
Yeah.
I don't too much information, but I cracked my ribs the week before, and the doctor said, "Don't worry about it," because it was killing me during the week. I'm like, I can't move, I can't sleep. It says, "Don't worry about it. Game day, we'll shoot it up, it'll be fine."
Okay.
Right? So I'm like, okay, all right. So game day comes, they shoot it up. I go out to work, practice. I go out to warm up. I'm like, not fine. It's killing me. They're like, that's impossible. So they some more, I'm like, all right, go back out there. And I go out there, and I'm like, it's killing me, bro. I'm wrong. I end up playing like 4 or 5 plays because I can't move. Everything goes back to BYU. It's crazy. A couple weeks later, I'm back at BYU doing something, and I was in the training room with a football player. I was doing something, and then one of the trainers and I'm like, my rib is still killing me. Like, what's going on? And he goes, come here. He comes over, gets me on my back, and does something. He just goes, Ugh. And my rib had been out of the joint for 3 weeks. And he popped it back in. No joke, I stood up, I was like, oh yeah! That feels great! Anyway, I don't know where we're going, Mike.
There's a lot in here. It really will change the way you look at football now. It's I don't want you to think it's all high concept and scheme. There's pettiness and rivalry.
There's drama.
Yeah, drama. All the stuff that Steve, lovingly said that I tend to uncover. But I wanted, Steve has a book here. He signed a bunch of copies. I signed a bunch. They're selling books. I want to just open it up to you guys for some questions, and we'll get Steve out of here in a couple minutes. But thank you for being here, and why don't we take a couple questions from the crowd? That's 2 lefty quarterbacks at the top.
There's only 2 in the whole world. Like, that's another problem of discrimination we need to talk about right now. How is it that 10% of humanity is left-handed and less than 1% are quarterbacks in the NFL? It's discrimination. Wholly, completely, no question.
We're going to take 2 more questions. I'm going to pass this down.
I don't need a microphone, thanks anyway. 1994 was also a historic year because it was the World Cup in America, the Men's World Cup.
Oh, yeah.
This is the shirt right here, and it was the last San Francisco Super Bowl winning season. What my question for you, Steve, the greatest left-handed quarterback of all time, and I enjoy listening to you as an analyst as well. What was the turning point of the 1994 regular season?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's famous, unfortunately. We were playing Philadelphia at home, and it was one of those games where just everything was just crap. It was just, the whole thing was just terrible. And got to towards the end of the game, 4th quarter, not even maybe the end of the 3rd quarter, and George Seifert came to Jerry and I on the sideline and said, hey, we're going to shut this down. This is a mess. We're down 40-2 or something. It was terrible. He goes, we're going to shut it down. And so, we didn't say, oh, yay, you know what I mean? But okay, we get it. So we go back out for the line. He goes, we'll run one more series of plays. So I go out to run the series, and 2 plays in, Elvis Grbac, you mentioned, in my backup quarterback, comes running on the field. I'm like, and for whatever reason, the victimization and the pain and the anger, and all the negative parts of myself that I put back low and really didn't believe, I thought I'd healed them all, right? Of all the feelings that I had, and it was like, and it was like all of a sudden George sending out Elvis Grbac to say, this mess that every 65,000 people are witnessing, it's you. And we're gonna have you jog off the field and everyone boo, right? So I had an out-of-body experience. Like, I remember thinking, we're fighting. Like, I'm gonna fight. We're fighting now. And people are like, it's national TV, and John Wetman is up in the booth. I'm like, I lost my mind. I don't care. We're fighting. And so you can see me in the background behind George Seifert, challenge him to essentially a duel like the old days. Like let's step it off right now. I am not taking another day of this. Like, I'm done. And it was an explosion of stuff that I didn't even make sense of. How I can't even tell you. Listen, tell me what my problem is. I just still don't know, completely understand. I give George credit because the things I said to him, most human beings would turn around. But he would not turn around. And they kept me away from him, and that was it. And so after the game, I was out of body. And I said, where's George? I came in the locker room after the game, where's George? Where's George? I'm not leaving here until I see we're having it out right now. George had left. George just got his stuff and went home. He didn't care. But my teammates, for whatever reason, took that. And the response was, man, that's a guy I want to follow. I'm like, that's a guy you think should be, like, put it straitjacket. You know? But whatever reason, I remember thinking later in the season when we got in this, we just never lost again. Yeah. I don't think we did. I don't think we lost another game. Yeah. And as the season wore on, we got better and better and better. And people would say, Steve Young's a fiery leader. You know, I'm like, where the hell you been? Like, what are you like? Yeah. And so I learned an incredibly important truth. In the law, they talk possession is 9/10 of the law. It's a legal term. Possession is 9/10 of the law. I learned that it's not possession, it's perception is 9/10 of the law. I learned a really important lesson that you might think that you're a fiery leader. You might actually think that you express that every day. But if they don't think that or know that, it doesn't matter. And I learned a really good lesson of communication. It's helped me in my marriage. I'm still not a great communicator. Like, if you left me to say nothing, I'm good with that. But that doesn't make it better. Like, open your mouth, communicate. My wife all the time, like, say something, you know? Like, no, I'm too lazy, I don't want to say anything. And it goes back to that moment when I learned that I opened my mouth out of, like, complete insanity, and the perception changed. And it was a crazy time. And I think that's probably what you're referring to.
And I believe that was the week after you went to Kansas City,
it's close. It's in the same area of time.
And I mean, no one in today's game could understand, like, they think there are these controversies or these pressure points. I mean, the pressure that, 6 years together with Joe and then, 2 trips to the conference title game against great Cowboy teams. There was so much pressure to win and on him. And they went to Kansas City where Joe was now the quarterback for the Chiefs, had played a game early in the season, and I remember at the walkthrough the day before at Arrowhead, Tim McDonald, the great veteran safety, all week long everyone had been saying, it's whatever, it's a regular season game, it's not, and he just put his arm on me and said, hey, enough lies. We got to win this for Steve. That's what this is about. And we didn't. But I want to go back and look. It was right before I went to Sports Illustrated. I was still Santa Rosa Press Democrat. I want to go back and look at how it aged because I felt there was something happened though. Because you threw up. You got hit so much. You threw up on the last drive and you gave everything and they wanted it so bad, and it was a close game, and you didn't win, but like something happened with that team.
Yeah, that's a good call. I used the more dramatic moment of me trying to kill George Seifert. But you might make a good point. Maybe this one was more important.
But something.
By the way, the book I wrote, they had them. I appreciate them bringing I wrote a book to my son because he kept coming home from school saying, hey, Dad, I heard that, you know, you and Joe Montana used to fight, and you punched you in the face, and you kicked him in the groin, and that didn't happen. And so it kept happening. So I realized I need to write down my story, or my son's not going to know the truth. He'll hear it from someone else, you know. So the book is really a 5-year, 6-year project that I didn't mean to ever put into a book. I just wanted my son to have it. So that when he grew up, he'd be like, what is the truth? Well, my dad told me the truth. But so the guy that helped me write it, I would talk out all the things that happened, we'd write it all down, then he would go talk to everyone who was a part of the story to say, okay, what do you remember? And he'd come back to me and said, hey, Steve, they say you remember this wrong. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? It's my story, bro. I'm telling you what happened to me. I know that this is what happened. And it got proven to me a couple of times that I had misremembered. And I think about history this way. These poor guys that had died long ago, we're trying to talk about them. I couldn't even write my own history. Right? How about these poor guys that have to let someone 5 generations later write it? Good luck to you. Good luck to you. But I've got 2 more minutes because my wife, I promised her. So
One more question?
Yeah.
Me?
Yeah. So I moved in '87 from Detroit. So unlike this young lady here, my 900 sessions from you.
Oh, that's God.
Two divorces.
It's a timing thing.
Thank you.
It's a timing thing, right? Yeah.
Anyway, thank you. It's been a great experience. So the best game that I've ever seen in any sport was the Packer game when Owens made the catch. And of course everyone knows about the catch, but I felt the game was just pins and needles the entire game. Can you describe in your words that game?
Well, they regretted it wasn't the Super Bowl, right? That's the way you want to end the Super Bowl, right? And it's funny, I think as athletes, we tend to remember the negative. I think it drives us. And so that game, I remember amazingly positive, but we didn't go on and win the Super Bowl. So it's but that game had all kinds of drama because of the book that's just described it. Mike Holmgren went to Green Bay, became the 49ers, squared, and Brett Favre, and they came back and ran our plays, and we're running sprint option, the play that Joe Montana threw to Dwight Clark to win the Cowboy game, is now Brett Favre's running it and beating us. We're like, oh, holy hell no. We're not doing that. And so we had this back and forth that they got the best of us. And so that was a game that kind of had to right the ship a little bit. And that was the last game that Mike Holmgren coached in the Green Bay. It kind of broke up the Green Bay Packers. Yeah. And Terrell Owens, if you remember, historic, pretty well-known fact that he dropped a bunch of passes during the game. But Terrell Owens was the biggest, strongest, fastest human I've ever seen. Like, if you ever saw him in the locker room with his shirt off, you're like, oh. Like, you just can't believe it. And then how big and strong he was. And he kept telling me during the game, Steve, don't give up on me, man. Don't, I get it. I go, Terrell, you're the biggest, fastest, strongest man I know. You're going to get the ball again. Don't worry about it. And that game, that play, which was really made because Chris Tallman stepped on my foot, the center, and I almost fell down. And Leroy Butler told me that when I disappeared, essentially, he kind of got lost. He goes, where'd he go? And just that fraction took him off the thing, and Terrell Owens ended up being open enough to throw that pass. So it tells you, if you ever want to be great, trip first.
I had a great story either way, but that was the greatest metaphor for everything you guys have been through. It's like you were going down. You didn't just trip, you were going down. And then you just, in your Steve Young defiant, crazy way, just stopped and said no. And then you threw into quadruple coverage for one of the greatest passes ever. And
good times. That was a good day. I run into a lot of people. That was one of those moments, like the catch one, where I was there. The one with Terrell is one of those times when people who were there, I was there. I was sitting in section 140. Those are the cool memories. And as I drive up 101 and go past where Candlestick was, it really hurts. Oh. It really hurts. I mean, it's a hole in my heart, Look, I know I couldn't live forever, and it was an old battle axe anyway. But there were some times where I mean, we had some times, and it, like, people that are older like me that live that out, man, we're family. We lived it out together. It was, how many times did we go out for a Monday night game when the fog was coming in, it was kind of heavy air, and you guys would like be in LA, and like we stomped the ground, the whole place would kind of shake, and it was like the grass was kind of, the tide was in, and so it was a little mucky and stuff. It kind of smelled funny. And I remember Dan Marino coming and playing for the Dolphins, you know, because they play in this field in Miami, you know, and he's like, what the hell is this? I can't even move. I said, what do you care? You can't move anyway. So just stand there. Just stand there and don't worry about it. It's a little bit, it's a mud puddle, but it's our mud puddle, so don't worry about it. Mike, thank you for
Thank you so much, Steve. That's two lefty quarterbacks at the top.
There's only two in the whole world. Like, that's another problem of discrimination we need to talk about right now. How is it that 10% of humanity is left-handed and less than 1% are quarterbacks in the NFL? It's discrimination. Wholly, completely, no question.
We're going to take 2 more questions. I'm going to pass this down.
I don't need a microphone, thanks anyway. 1994 was also historic year because it was the World Cup in America, the Men's World Cup.
Oh, yeah.
This is the shirt right here, and it was the last San Francisco Super Bowl winning season. What my question for you, Steve, the greatest left-handed quarterback of all time, and I enjoy listening to you as an analyst as well. What was the turning point of the 1994 regular season?
Well, it's famous, unfortunately. We were playing Philadelphia at home, and it was one of those games where just everything was just crap. It was just, the whole thing was just terrible. And got towards the end of the game, fourth quarter, not even maybe the end of the third quarter, and George Seifert came to Jerry and I on the sideline and said, hey, we're going to shut this down. This is a mess. We're down 40-2 or something. It was terrible. He goes, we're going to shut it down. And so, you know, we didn't say, oh, yay, you know what I mean? But okay, we get it. So we go back out for the line. He goes, we'll run one more series of plays. So I go out to run the series, and 2 plays in, Elvis Herback, you mentioned, in my backup quarterback, comes running on the field. I'm like, and for whatever reason, the victimization and the pain and the anger, and all the negative parts of myself that I put back low and really didn't believe, I thought I'd healed them all, right? Of all the feelings that I had, and it was like, and it was like all of a sudden George sending out Elvis Herback to say, this mess that every 65,000 people are witnessing, it's you. And we're gonna have you jog off the field and everyone boo, right? So I had an out-of-body experience. Like, I remember thinking, we're fighting. Like, I'm gonna fight. We're fighting now. And people are like, it's national TV, and John Wetman is up in the booth. I'm like, I lost my mind. I don't care. We're fighting it. So you can see me in the background behind George Seifert, challenge him to essentially a duel like the old days. Like let's step it off right now. I am not taking another day of this. Like, I'm done. And it was an explosion of stuff that I didn't even make sense of. How I can't even tell you. I said, tell me what my problem is. I still don't know, completely understand. I give George credit because the things I said to him, most human beings would turn around. But he would not turn around. And they kept me away from him, and that was it. And so after the game, I was out of body. And I said, where's George? I came in the locker room after the game, where's George? I'm not leaving here until I see him. We're having it out right now. George had left. George just got his stuff and went home. He didn't care. But my teammates, for whatever reason, took that. And the response was, man, that's a guy I want to follow. I'm like, that's a guy you think should be like put it straitjacket. You know? But whatever reason, and I remember thinking later in the season when we got in this, we just never lost again.
Yeah.
I don't think we did. I don't think we lost another game.
Yeah.
And as the season wore on, we got better and better and better. And people would say, Steve Young's a fiery leader. You know, I'm like, where the hell you been? Like, what are you like?
Yeah.
And so I learned an incredibly important truth. In the law, they talk possession is 9/10 of the law. It's a legal term. Possession is 9/10 of the law. I learned that it's not possession, it's perception is 9/10 of the law. I learned a really important lesson. That you might think that you're a fiery leader. You might actually think that you express that every day. But if they don't think that or know that, it doesn't matter. And I learned a really good lesson of communication. It's helped me in my marriage. I'm still not a great communicator. Like if you left me to say nothing, I'm good with that. But that doesn't make it better. Like open your mouth, communicate. My wife all the time like, say something, you know, like, no, I'm too lazy, I don't want to say anything. And it goes back to that moment when I learned that I opened my mouth out of like complete insanity, and the perception changed. And it was a crazy time. And I think that's probably what you're referring to.
And I believe that was the week after you went to Kansas City, if
It's close. It's in the same area of time.
And I mean, no one in today's game could understand, like they think there are these controversies or these pressure points. I mean, the pressure that, 6 years together with Joe and then, 2 trips to the conference title game against great Cowboy teams. There was so much pressure to win and on him. And they went to Kansas City where Joe was now the quarterback for the Chiefs and played a game early in the season. And I remember at the walkthrough the day before at Arrowhead, Tim McDonald, the great veteran safety, all week long everyone had been saying it's whatever, it's a regular season game, it's not, and he just put his arm on me and said, hey, enough lies. We got to win this for Steve. That's what this is about. And
we didn't.
And then, but I want to go back and look. It was right before I went to Sports Illustrated. I was still at Santa Rosa Press Democrat. I want to go back and look at how it aged because I felt there was something happened though. Because you threw up. You got hit so much. You threw up on the last drive, and you gave everything, and they wanted it so bad, and it was a close game, and you didn't win, but like something happened with that team.
Yeah, that's a good call. I used the more dramatic moment of me trying to kill Joseph. But you might make a good point. Maybe this one was more important.
But something.
By the way, the book I wrote, they had them. I appreciate them bringing I wrote a book to my son because he kept coming home from school saying, "Hey, Dad, I heard that you and Joe Montana used to fight, and he punched you in the face, and you kicked him in the groin, and that didn't happen." And so it kept happening. So I realized I need to write down my story, or my son's not going to know the truth. He'll hear it from someone else, So the book is really a 5-year, 6-year project that I didn't mean to ever put into a book. I just wanted my son to have it, so that when he grew up, he'd be like, "What is the truth?" Well, my dad told me the truth. But so the guy that helped me write it, I would talk out all the things that happened, we'd write it all down, then he would go talk to everyone who was a part of the story to say, okay, what do you remember? And he'd come back to me and said, hey, Steve, they say you remember this wrong. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? It's my story, bro. I'm telling you what happened to me. I know that this is what happened. And it got proven to me a couple of times that I had misremembered. And I think about history this way. These poor guys that had died long ago, we're trying to talk about them. I couldn't even write my own history. Right? How about these poor guys that have to let someone 5 generations later write it? Good luck to you. Good luck to you. But I've got 2 more minutes because my wife, I promised her. So
One more question?
Yeah.
Me?
Yeah. So I moved in '87 from Detroit. So unlike this young lady here, my 900 sessions from you.
Oh, that's God.
Two divorces.
It's a timing thing.
Thank you.
It's a timing thing, right? Yeah.
Anyway, thank you. It's been a great experience. So the best game that I've ever seen in any sport was the Packer game when Owens made the catch. And of course everyone knows about the catch, but I felt the game was just pins and needles the entire game. Can you describe in your words that game?
Well, they were great that it wasn't the Super Bowl, right? That's the way you want to end the Super Bowl, right? And it's funny, I think as athletes, we tend to remember the negative. I think it drives us. And so that game, I remember amazingly positive, but we didn't go on and win the Super Bowl. So it's but that game had all kinds of drama because of the book that's just described it. Mike Holmgren went to Green Bay, became the 49ers, squared, and Brett Favre, and they came back and ran our plays, and we're running sprint option, the play that Joe Montana threw to Dwight Clark to win the Cowboy game, is now Brett Favre's running it and beating us. We're like, oh, holy hell no. We're not doing that. And so we had this back and forth that they got the best of us. And so that was a game that kind of had to right the ship a little bit. And that was the last game that Mike Holmgren coached in the Green Bay. It kind of broke up the Green Bay Packers. Yeah. And Terrell Owens, if you remember, historic, pretty well-known fact that he dropped a bunch of passes during the game. But Terrell Owens was the biggest, strongest, fastest human I've ever seen. Like, if you ever saw him in the locker room with his shirt off, you're like, oh. Like, you just can't believe it. And then how big and strong he was. And he kept telling me during the game, Steve, don't give up on me, man. Don't, I go, Terrell, you're the biggest, fastest, strongest man I know. You're going to get the ball again. Don't worry about it. And that game, that play, which was really made because Chris Tallman stepped on my foot, the center, and I almost fell down. And Leroy Butler told me that when I disappeared, essentially, he kind of got lost. He goes, where'd he go? And just that fraction took him off the thing, and Terrell Owens ended up being open enough to throw that pass. So it tells you, if you ever want to be great, trip first.
I had a great story either way, but that was the greatest metaphor for everything you guys have been through. It's like you were going down. You didn't just trip, you were going down. And then you just, in your Steve Young defiant, crazy way, just stopped and said no. And then you threw into quadruple coverage for one of the greatest passes ever. And
good times. That was a good day. I run into a lot of people. That was one of those moments, like the catch one, where I was there. The one to Terrell is one of those times when people who were there, I was there. I was sitting in section 140. Those are the cool memories. And as I drive up 101 and go past where Candlestick was, it really hurts. Oh. It really hurts. I mean, it's a hole in my heart, Look, I know I couldn't live forever, and it was an old battle axe anyway. But there were some times where, Mike. I mean, we had some times, and people that are older like me that lived that out, man, we're family. We lived it out together. It was, how many times did we go out for a Monday night game when the fog was coming in, it was kind of heavy air, and you guys would be in LA, and we stomped the ground, the whole place would kind of shake, and it was like the grass was kind of, the tide was in, and so it was a little monkey and stuff. It kind of smelled funny. And I remember Dan Marino coming and playing for the Dolphins, because they play in this field in Miami, and he's like, what the hell is this? I can't even move. I said, what do you care? You can't move anyway. So just stand there. Just stand there and don't worry about it. It's a little bit, it's a mud puddle, but it's our mud puddle, so don't worry about it. Mike, thank you for
Thank you so much, Steve. Because I'm multitasking.
Yeah, all right.
How's it going? I'm doing all right. Right on. I'm good.
Welcome here on our on Niners Radio 49. This is a special edition of Niners Radio 49 exclusive. We're talking with the legend Michael Silver, a former worked at Sports Illustrated. He was here as we're doing this taping tonight. Pre-recorded a special section with him and former Super Bowl champion and two-time league MVP, five-time passing rating leader Steve Young, Michael Silver. Welcome to Niners Radio 49.
Thank you so much for having me. Really pumped to be here.
Just tell me, you wrote this book, took you some time to get done. You've been in this business forever, going back to when you started doing the covering the 49ers. And
Yeah, this book is about the Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay coaching crew, Mike McDaniel, Matt LaFleur, Raheem Morris, and how they're changing the game. But it really starts with Mike Shanahan. And as a young beat writer at the Santa Rosa Press-Democrat, I was covering the 49ers when Mike Shanahan showed up in 1992 as their offensive coordinator, and he was kind of an embattled guy. He'd been fired by Al Davis ingloriously as the coach of the LA Raiders. He'd been fired by Dan Reeves and accused of insubordination in Denver, and was trying to just kind of rebuild his career and his reputation. And he joined forces with Steve Young, who was never good enough in the eyes of the fan base because he was following the greatest of all time in Joe Montana, until Mike Shanahan and Steve Young did so many great things together, culminating in that Super Bowl 29 record-setting performance. And then, of course, Steve Young was, made for life. And Mike Shanahan then went off to Denver, brought in the outside zone scheme to go with the Walsh offense, changed football history, and spawned this incredible group that is the focus of the Why Is Everything.
Thinking when Kyle, or I think when Mike Shanahan was fired by Dan Reeves in Denver, only his fate was he was let go, fired by the Broncos after the '92 season. And it's back in perspective. That was the final season of Mike Ditka, two former proteges of the legendary Tom Landry in Dallas.
That's a great point, but football's kind of crazy that way, that so many great coaches have worked for other great coaches and kind of followed in their footsteps. No one more influential than Bill Walsh, who built the 49ers into a dynasty, coached them to 3 Super Bowls. And, Mike Shanahan, in this book, we see that he first encounters Bill Walsh when he's a college kid and goes to a coaching clinic and hears Bill Walsh speak, and that's a formative experience for him. And then when he comes to the 49ers, he studies, everything that Bill Walsh had done just in terms of creating an offense and creating a franchise, and that ends up being a really important experience for Mike Shanahan. So in some ways, these guys are all indebted to Bill Walsh and his greatness.
Now, of course, Steve Young was here earlier. He's long gone on home as we're doing this taping. But let's talk about his time with the 49ers. Of course, he became the everyday starter in 1991, unfortunately, with the Joe Montana missing the 91 season with that elbow injury that he ended up had to have surgery. So all those mileage he threw his elbow finally caught up with him, and then Steve Young he got hurt at midseason. Steve Bono takes over. The team was at 4-6.
Yeah,
and it was the first time the Niners had been below 500 at that stage late of any season since 1980. But then they got hot at the end, won their final 6 games, and nearly making the playoffs. And who knows if they would have gotten in that year? And they almost won the NFC West again. Who knows what would have happened if they would have gotten into the playoffs? But they were going to have their hands with the Washington Redskins, who was world beaters that year. Started the season with 10 or 11 straight wins to start the year, and they had a real good team. No disregard to what Joe Gibbs had, the success he had up in the nation's capital, winning 3 Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks. But with Steve Young there in the early 90s, still up to the point he got to the pinnacle, winning the franchise's 5th Super Bowl.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring up the 91 season, because Steve Young came back after being injured, and they did win those last 6 games, and nobody wanted to play them in the playoffs. And in that last game, they were playing Mike Ditka's Bears, who needed to win for playoff positioning. It was Monday Night Football.
I remember.
And the 49ers just dismantled them, beat them by about, 45 points, if I recall.
By the way, I was a freshman in high school when that happened. I remember seeing that annihilation, because if the Bears gave the Detroit Lions the NFC Central Division with Wayne Fontes. I bet Wayne Fontes is still giving thank you holiday greeting cards to George Seifert and Steve Young.
Yeah, you're right. And so the Bears needed a win, and they came to Candlestick and just got absolutely annihilated. And I think everyone in football gave a sigh of relief who made the playoffs that the 49ers were not going to be in it. And you're right, we don't know how far they could have gone. But the next year, Mike Shanahan arrived. They hosted the NFC Championship game, got upset by the Jimmy Johnson Cowboys, who are another incredible team. They went to Dallas the next year for the NFC Championship game, lost to the Cowboys again. Both times the Cowboys won the Super Bowl. Then they loaded up in '94. They got Deion Sanders, Richard Dent, Ricky Jackson,
Charles Van.
Yeah.
Tim
It just, so many, impactful players. And it was Super Bowl or bust. And, and what they ultimately did with Mike Shanahan directing the offense and Steve Young throwing the 6 touchdown passes, a record, breaking Joe Montana's record in Super Bowl 29, was just, unbelievably epic. And that's kind of the jumping off point for this book. And then, we bring it all the way up to modern day.
See, that was my senior year in high school when they won that last Super Bowl win. And I enjoyed that one so much, because that was my final year in high school, and I was now a young adult teenager. To see, it's funny because when they won back-to-back in '88 and '89, Super Bowl 23 is still my favorite of my youth because of the drive, and the best Super Bowl drive of the decade of my. And then they went back-to-back when I was in junior high, middle school, 6th and 7th grade, when they dominated. I've been doing my podcast on Niners Radio 49. We have done. I'm paying homage to the 3 of the 4 or the 5 Super Bowls this year. The 40th of the '84 team. They went 15-1, won 18 games in the season. The 35th anniversary of their back-to-back Super Bowl, and then their 30th for this year. And I'm chronicling every week by week, right? Every game, every score. We all talk about the low point of the season of '94 when they lost to the Eagles and when they got annihilated at Candlestick. And I think in perspective, that was the best thing that could happen to them, because they go into Motown, Detroit, they win that game, and they didn't lose another game till that week 17, that Monday night game against the Vikings, who was playing for a NFC Central Division Championship by former Niners assistant Dennis Green, which they ended up winning. But the '94 season, it was so memorable, beating the Dallas Cowboys and Steve Young taking that big victory lap around Candlestick.
Yeah, that was great times. I had just gotten Sports Illustrated during that season, and I remember.
Yep, you and Peter King. I know he's now retired. You guys are some of the two on a national perspective. I even had the 1994-95, like the 30-minute version of recapping the Super Bowl season, and then the
highlight video.
The highlight video, and you guys talk about Steve when they drafted for the upcoming season, the preview. Drafting J.J. Stokes, training up with Cleveland, and then, at the other part before the Joe Montana Classic was Deion coming back. And I look back now about that salary cap thing. This was something I didn't understand then. Now I look back in perspective. It was a real thing, big thing when that salary cap came. These teams showed when they lost Ricky Waters, because the following year they didn't have that running game, and that problem. They had the number 1 defense, and that was part of the reason that kept them out of Steve Young winning another Super Bowl.
Yeah, there was the famous play where Adam Walker fumbles in the playoff game, and poor Adam Walker. He was really a good guy and a fullback who was asked to go into that starting running back role by necessity, and it didn't go great, but. That was a crazy era. Eddie DeBartolo was so generous and so committed to trying to win championships that the rest of the league said, we're going to try to put some restrictions on. Well, the 49ers, along with the Cowboys, were very smart. It was supposed to be a hard cap, and both teams said, you know what, we can find a way to load up on players. Even with those rules, we'll do these big signing bonuses, we'll prorate them, and now this is, of course, is common practice.
Well,
and, eventually it catches up to you, but it's a way to be more aggressive in the present.
I agree, because, it's funny, the joke about the elephant, what do you do, prevent an elephant from take away its credit cards, and I think that's what other people in the NFL owners were trying to take Eddie DeBartolo's credit cards away.
Yeah.
I mean, but you know, the Niners, of course, when they lost to the Packers, the first of 5 straight losses, and then they finally beat them on the catch, and then, you know, nothing new at the end, and Eddie DeBartolo caught in that caught with that mess in Louisiana, ended up getting an indefinite suspension. Then he gave the team to Denise DeBartolo, the club, and by '99, Steve Mariucci in '97 took over. They went through a lot of transition. Around this time, 25 years ago, Steve Young got knocked out on the Monday night against Arizona. The transitional period, they started the season, won 3 of their first 4, but then lost 11 of their final 12. They finished with a losing record for the first time in nearly 2 decades, and then that's when the Rams, they were like the '99 version of the '81-40, or the '81 version of the Rams with the '99 version of the '81 49ers come out of nowhere with Kurt Warner, and that the changing of the guard of that rivalry. They had 17 straight wins, and then the Rams started dominating them. I think winning 5 or 6 or 7 of the next 8 games.
Yeah, you know, it's amazing the 49ers stayed as great as they did for as long as they did. And to their credit, they had plenty of down years, but I know they haven't won another Super Bowl. But look, you know, Jim Harbaugh got them to a Super Bowl. They nearly won, and obviously to the other 2 conference title games, which were very close. Kyle Shanahan has gotten them to 2 Super Bowls and 2 additional conference title games all in the last 5 seasons. It's not what anyone in that franchise or the fan base wants, but they're knocking on the door, and I don't think it'll be too long before there's a 6th parade down Market Street.
Yeah, I've been waiting for that. I mean, I got young kids in their 20s, 30 and under, picking my brain at 47, will be 48 at the end of the year, saying, man, what was it like being a Niner fan in the 80s? What was it like Joe Montana?
Well, I actually know because I grew up a 49er fan, and until I started covering them in 1989, I was just a 49er fan, you know, as a kid and then a college kid. And I grew up in LA, so there weren't very many of us, but a lot of my childhood was frustrating, but I'm the same age as the Super Bowl. So when I was 16, that all started to change.
Well, so you became a Niner fan in the LA area? What happened?
Well, I was born in San Francisco, and so you know, I lived in San Francisco until right before kindergarten. And my dad had decided that he loved the Bay Area teams, and so I, you know, of course, idolized my dad and want to be like him. So he basically said Niners, Warriors, you know, A's, and I always identified with those Northern California teams. And then, of course, I went to college at Cal and have lived in Northern California ever since.
Well, yours truly is doing Cal Golden Bears baseball. I've got to go over and do some practice game, play-by-play practice games for their fall schedule. So, you know.
Great.
You know, and I was there the couple of weeks ago. For football, my team was the Miami Hurricanes. Going back to the, I always tell a lot of people, you know, the story of that 1989 season. The Miami Hurricanes beat Alabama in the Sugar Bowl New Year's Day, 1990. Then about 3 weeks later, the 49ers win their 2nd Super Bowl.
In Miami.
No, in
New Orleans.
New Orleans in January of 1990.
Yeah.
And I was in the 7th grade, junior high, middle school. I was like a kid in a candy store. Because, like, my birthday's on December 29th. It was 1989. I turned 13, became a teenager at the last 2 or 3 days of the 80s before the new decade. It's Christmas, birthday. The last gift I would get was sometime in late January when the Niners win the Super Bowl. That was my childhood. That was my, you know,
That's
even though
awesome.
some of those years when they didn't win the Super Bowl, it was like every year they're going to the playoffs. And then, you know, except 91. And then as in my early 20s, things with the salary cap, Steve Young got hurt and all those signing bonuses catch up. And then that dead money, you know, you got to pay the bills. And, you know, as things started to be a little different with Mugen. And they kind of, you know, went to those 2 playoffs to come back against the Giants.
That was
Yours
great.
truly, I was there at that game.
Nice.
I'll never forget a good friend of mine who now just recently got engaged, a big-time New York Giant fan. He was at my birthday party talking about the Giants going to kill the Niners, and then I'll never forget. Someone gave me a ticket when the team would play fans. I said, I'm going to go in. And the minute I get in there, Jeremy Shockey, the former tight end at the U, dropped a potential touchdown that could have buried the Niners for good. But then Jeff Garcia, T.O. with a bad sore groin, and Jeff Chandler, who had a sprained ankle, did that magic. And the Giants, the Niners had that comeback and just like, it was like being, and then, the lean years came with Mike Nolan and Singletary, then Harbaugh, and then it felt like, and then the coaching with Tom Sula, and then with Chip Kelly, then with this regime. I believe they're going to win a Super Bowl. I hope they can get some people back. Got to take it one game at a time, though, Mike. And I think I'm going to want to enjoy your book, though, sometime. And I'd like you come on as my guest on Niners Radio 49 on a future date.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for having me, and I hope you love my book, The Why Is Everything. It's got lots of Kyle Shanahan, lots of 49ers stuff, Mike McDaniel, who was there for so long, and all that gang. But yeah, thank you for having me, and let's see how they do this year. It might turn out a little better than it looks right now, and I'll join you later for sure.
All right, Mike, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's Mike Silver from working currently with
The Athletic.
With the Athletic, yeah. And that's where I think I like listen to your content. I got to catch up with your content. Also with David Lombardi and Tim Kawakami, both at the San Francisco Standard, and I've had Matt Mayoko from NBC Sports Bay Area come on there, and they're the best. And I even do my post games when I do at the Hyatt Regency. We do all the post-game stuff, rolling clips at the press conference. We want Niner fans to know everything about 49er football. It's been great, Michael.
Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon.
All right, Michael Silver from with the new book. Check it out. Professor B here for Niners Radio 49 podcast. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. Well, I had a sit-down chat with Mike Silver. You check out the book and go to local news stores or online to pick up the new book and the Steve Young book as well. Check out all the podcasts and so much more on youtube.com/@NinersRadio49. Thank you for watching this special presentation, a Niners Radio 49 exclusive with my guest host, Mike Silver. Niners Radio 49 podcast is an association with the Satellite Digital Media News Network, where every team has a fan and every fan has a voice. The network home of champions. Thank you for listening.